A message arrived on a functioning communicator that dropped from orbit in a sealed container. Official council seal. Official channels. Nothing hostile about it at all, which made Taemin immediately suspicious. The message was simple. Full pardon for all charges. Immediate extraction. Transportation back to human space with honors. All he had to do was leave Kier 9 within 24 hours. The creatures would be studied humanely by council scientists. Everyone would get what they wanted. Taemin read the message 3 times. Then he walked to the edge of his territory where Baum was teaching Saul how to hunt. The young Sin had grown larger over the past weeks, bonding with Taemin in a way that made its mimicry helpful rather than harmful. It could copy warning calls from various species now, keeping threats away from their territory. "What do you think, buddy?" Taemin asked Baum. "Should I leave you here so they can put you in cages and run experiments?" Baum tilted his massive head and made a sound deep in his chest. Not quite a growl. Something softer. Taemin had learned this meant contentment, safety, home. Haniel dropped from the trees above, her colors shifting to curious patterns. Day emerged from his favorite mud wallow, dripping and looking pleased with himself. They all sensed something was happening. They always knew when Taemin was troubled. He recorded his response using the same communicator. Negative. These creatures aren't prisoners or specimens. They're my unit. We leave together or not at all. He paused, then added, "And tell whoever wrote this to try being honest next time. You don't care about humane study. You want to eliminate evidence of your illegal arena." The response from the council was immediate and furious. How dare a human refuse rescue? How dare he prioritize animals over his own species? The xenophobic faction saw their opportunity. If Taemin wouldn't leave voluntarily, they would force the issue. The council authorized orbital bombardment of Taemin's sector. They would destroy the human and his creatures, then claim it was a natural disaster, a meteor strike, a volcanic event. Kier 9 was a death world after all. These things happened. But Ambassador Jiwoo had prepared for this. She had spent months building alliances and calling in favors. When the bombardment order went through, she activated every piece of political capital she had earned. Human defense fleets moved into position. 3 allied species sent their own ships. Within hours, Kier 9's orbit was crowded with vessels from a dozen different governments. The standoff was tense. Weapons were armed but not fired. Threats were made but not acted upon. And in the middle of it all, one human on the surface had no idea his survival had nearly triggered an interstellar war. Taemin was too busy exploring. He had found ruins in the deeper parts of the forest, ancient structures covered in vines and thyme. He had seen them before but dismissed them as natural rock formations. Now looking closer, he realized they were deliberately built. Cities, temples, monuments. Someone had lived here once. He spent days documenting the ruins with his salvaged equipment. The architecture was fascinating. Doorways sized for creatures larger than day. Murals showing beings living alongside the apex predators. This planet hadn't been empty. It had been inhabited. And whoever lived here hadn't feared the creatures. They had lived with them. Saul proved invaluable during the exploration. The young Sin could squeeze into tight spaces and mimic sounds to scare away smaller dangers. Baum's strength opened blocked passages. Haniel's climbing ability reached high places. Day's size moved obstacles that would have taken Taemin weeks to shift. They were a team, not human and animals, not master and pets. A team where everyone contributed their strengths. The discovery that changed everything was a chamber deep beneath the largest structure. The walls were covered in writing that Taemin couldn't read, but his communicator could translate. It was a history, a warning, a testament. This planet had been sacred. The predators were guardians, protectors of an ecosystem that maintained balance across an entire region of space. The Council's predecessor government had known this. They had designated Kier 9 as protected territory. But that designation had been buried, hidden, erased by officials who wanted to use the planet for executions. The Council had been violating their own laws for centuries. Taemin transmitted everything he found. Images, translations, historical records. He broadcasted on every channel he could access. Within hours, the evidence was spreading across the galactic networks faster than the Council could suppress it. The political fallout was catastrophic. Council members resigned. Entire committees were dissolved. Criminal investigations were launched. The xenophobic faction lost all credibility when evidence showed they had known about the protected status and hidden it deliberately. Ambassador Jiwoo called Taemin directly. You did it. They're offering terms. Full protection for Kier 9, reparations for what they did to you, and a position if you want it. What kind of position? Taemin asked, suspicious. Warden of Kier 9, first official guardian of a protected world. You would work with alien specialists to preserve the ecosystem and study the predators properly, with their consent, not in cages. Taemin looked around his camp. Bomb was wrestling with Day, a game they played that somehow never resulted in serious injury. Hanul was teaching Sol how to change colors, patient in a way she had never been before. This was home now. These creatures were family. I accept, he said. But I have conditions. My companions stay with me. No experiments they don't consent to, and anyone who comes here treats them with respect or they leave. The agreement was signed within days. Kier 9 became the first officially recognized sanctuary world. The predators were classified as sentient species deserving protection. And Taemin became something no one had expected, a bridge between humans and creatures that had once been considered mindless killers. The first group of trainees arrived 6 months later. Humans and aliens both, carefully selected and trained in basic xenobiology. Taemin met them at the landing site with Bomb at his side, the massive Vrax radiating calm authority. Welcome to Kier 9, Taemin said. First rule, these aren't pets or tools. They're people just different from us. Second rule, earn their trust, don't demand it. Third rule, if you can't show respect, you're on the next shuttle out. Ambassador Jiwoo visited during the second year. She found Taemin watching the sunset from a cliff overlooking the forest. Bomb had a mate now and cubs who treated Taemin like a strange but beloved uncle. Hanul nested in the restored ruins with her own young. Day patrolled the southern territories, training younger Droll beasts in pack dynamics. Sol had grown into a full sin stalker, bonded permanently to Taemin in a way that scientists were still studying. Any regrets? Jiwoo asked. Taemin was quiet for a moment. He thought about the courtroom where they had sentenced him to death. The drop pod that was supposed to be his coffin. The creatures that were meant to be his executioners. I was sent here to die, he said finally. Instead, I found a family. I found a purpose. I found out that the things we fear most might just need someone to understand them. He smiled. No regrets. Below them, a young alien trainee successfully got a juvenile Vrax to follow basic commands. The trainee was crying with joy. The Vrax looked confused but pleased with itself. Taemin remembered his first days with Bomb, how impossible it had seemed. You changed the galaxy's mind, Jiwoo said. You proved humans can adapt to anything. Maybe, Taemin said. Or maybe I just proved that everyone, human or not, responds to basic decency and respect. He stood up, brushing dirt from his pants. Come on, I want to introduce you to Bomb's cubs. Fair warning, they're bitey. As they walked down the path toward the camp, surrounded by creatures that had been designed to kill, living in harmony with beings from a dozen different species, Taemin realized something important. The council had sent him to Kier 9 as punishment. They had tried to break him to make an example of him. Instead, they had given him exactly what he needed. A chance to prove that the most dangerous predators could become the most loyal companions. That trust transcended species. That family was built, not born. They had sent apex predators to kill the human marine. He had named them, befriended them, and built something better than anyone had imagined possible. The galaxy would never be quite the same. The Galactic Council was breaking apart. What had started as a simple execution had become a political crisis. 3 major species were threatening to leave the Council entirely. Human representatives were demanding reparations. And in the center of it all, one Marine sergeant on a death world had become a symbol of something the Council couldn't control. Ambassador Jiwoo worked 20-hour days, leveraging Taemin's survival into political capital. She was brilliant and ruthless, turning every news cycle into ammunition. Every time the Council tried to bury the story, she made sure it exploded across every network in the galaxy. But not everyone in the Council was ready to give up. The xenophobic faction still held power in several key committees. They couldn't send more mercenaries without exposing themselves further. They couldn't bomb Kier 9 without triggering a war, so they did the only thing they could do. They sent something that wouldn't look like an attack. The 4th predator arrived silently. No drop pod, no warning. Just a creature that specialized in infiltration and deception, a sin stalker, one of the rarest and most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. It could mimic voices perfectly. It could copy appearances well enough to fool electronic sensors. And it was parasitic, designed to divide and destroy social groups from within. Taemin first noticed something was wrong when Bomb started acting strangely. The big Vrax would growl at empty spaces and refuse to enter certain areas of their territory. Hanul became skittish, her colors shifting erratically. Even Dae seemed nervous, constantly scanning the surroundings. Then Taemin heard his own voice calling from the forest. "Bomb, come here, boy. I need your help." But Taemin was standing right there and he hadn't said anything. Bomb's head swiveled between the forest and his human companion, confusion evident in his glowing eyes. The voice came again, identical to Taemin's down to the smallest inflection. "Hanul, Dae, form up. We need to check the perimeter." That's when the attack came, not from an outside threat, but from within. Bomb lunged at Hanul, thinking the score was somehow responsible for the false voices. Hanul fought back, her quills extending in defense. Dae roared and charged at both of them, trying to stop the fight, but only making it worse. Taemin shouted commands, but the Sin Stalker was mimicking his voice from multiple directions. His companions couldn't tell which Taemin was real. The carefully built trust shattered in seconds. Bomb's claws raked across Hanul's side. Hanul's quills struck Dae's shoulder. The Droll beast's jaws closed around Bomb's leg. Taemin threw himself into the middle of the chaos, taking hits meant for his companions. A claw caught his arm, opening a deep gash. A quill grazed his ribs, burning with venom. But he kept moving, kept shouting, kept trying to stop them from killing each other. Then he saw it. A shadow that moved wrong, a shape that flickered at the edges of perception. The Sin Stalker had revealed itself, confident that its work was done. These predators would destroy each other and the human would die in the crossfire. Taemin changed tactics immediately. He stopped shouting commands and started simply moving. He positioned himself between his fighting companions and the Sin Stalker. He didn't say a word. He just pointed. Bomb saw it first. The Vrax's head snapped toward the Sin Stalker, and something ancient and primal kicked in. This was the real threat. This was the thing that smelled wrong. His growl changed from confused anger to focused hunting fury. Hanul stopped fighting and followed Bomb's gaze. Her adaptive camouflage shifted to hunting patterns. Dae shook off his confusion and focused on the flickering shadow. The Sin Stalker realized its mistake too late. It tried to flee, but it was surrounded by 3 apex predators who were now united against it. Bomb cut off its retreat. Hanul struck from above. Dae charged from the side. The fight was brutal and short. The Sin Stalker was dangerous, but it was built for deception, not direct combat. When it was over, Taemin approached the fallen creature carefully. It was dying, its mimicry failing, revealing its true form, something small and pathetic compared to the terrors it had imitated. Then he saw the second shape, something smaller still, emerging from the Sin Stalker's torn body, a juvenile Sin not yet bonded to a host. It was vulnerable and terrified, making sounds like a frightened child. Every tactical instinct told Taemin to kill it. This species had nearly destroyed his pack. But he looked at his injured companions, all of them watching to see what he would do. He thought about the choices that had brought him here. About mercy given when it should have been withheld. He picked up the juvenile Sin carefully. It trembled in his hands, too young to be a threat. Too scared to even try mimicking anything. "I'm calling you Sul," he said quietly. "It means honest. You're going to learn to be honest, even if your species isn't." The decision to keep Saul was the hardest one Taemin had made. Bomb was suspicious of the young Sin at first, keeping distance. Hanul watched it constantly, waiting for betrayal. Dae simply ignored it, which was probably the healthiest response. But Taemin was patient. He taught Saul the same way he had taught the others. Boundaries, consistency, trust earned through action. The juvenile Sin was smart and learned quickly. Within weeks, it could mimic useful sounds without the malicious intent. It could call out warnings in Taemin's voice that actually meant what they said. The injuries from the Sin Stalker's attack healed slowly. Taemin treated his companion's wounds and his own with the last of his medical supplies. They would all carry scars, but they were alive, and somehow the experience had made their bonds stronger rather than breaking them. He realized something important during those long days of recovery. He had been treating his companions like soldiers under his command. Clear orders, rigid structure. But they weren't soldiers. They were living beings with their own thoughts and fears and needs. He had to stop commanding and start listening. so he watched. He learned their body language better. He understood what certain sounds meant. He figured out that Bomb needed reassurance after conflicts, that Hanul required space when stressed, that Day showed affection through proximity rather than touch. The story of the Sinstalker attack spread through the galactic networks. The Predator Whisperer had faced an enemy designed to destroy social bonds and had come out stronger. Some species saw it as proof of human adaptability. Others saw it as proof that humans were too dangerous to be trusted. Human analysts saw something different. They saw a Marine sergeant using psychology and observation to maintain unit cohesion in impossible circumstances. They saw tactics that could be taught and principles that could be applied. Taemin had become more than a symbol. He had become a case study. On Kier 9, surrounded by creatures that had tried to kill him and now protected him, Taemin watched the sunset with Sol curled up on his lap like a strange cat. Bomb dozed nearby. Hanul groomed her scales on a warm rock. Tay snored like distant thunder. They were damaged. All of them. But they were together, and somehow that was enough. Taemin found the first camera hidden in a tree hollow. It was small, sophisticated, and completely at odds with the idea that Kier 9 was just a dumping ground for prisoners. He spent the next 3 days searching his territory and found 11 more. Someone had been watching him from the beginning. He gathered the cameras in front of his cave and arranged them in a neat pile. Then he looked directly at the newest one, still active, and spoke clearly. "You wanted a show? Hope you're enjoying it. Let me introduce my squad." He gestured to Bomb, who raised his massive head, to Hanul, who flickered through 3 different colors in warning display, to Day, who slammed one enormous paw against the ground hard enough to crack stone.
"We know you're watching."
"We know this is an arena, and we're not playing anymore." The message reached the Galactic Council within hours. The chambers erupted in chaos. The xenophobic faction, already embarrassed by Taemin's survival, called for immediate action. They couldn't allow a human to mock them like this. They couldn't allow others to see predators serving a human willingly. "Send mercenaries," their leader demanded. "Kill the human. Destroy the evidence. End this now." 12 alien hunters were dispatched to Kier 9. They were professionals, each one a veteran of dozens of contracts. They carried advanced weapons, tactical armor, and enough firepower to level a small city. Their mission brief was simple: eliminate the target by any means necessary. They landed in 3 groups of 4, establishing a perimeter around Taemin's territory. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Kral, studied the terrain through electronic binoculars. "1 human with 3 animals," he said confidently. "We will have this done before nightfall." But Kral had made a critical mistake. He thought of Taemin's companions as animals. He didn't think of them as soldiers. Taemin had been preparing for this. He had studied the mercenaries' approach through Hanul's scouting reports. The score could move unseen, her adaptive camouflage making her nearly invisible. She had watched the aliens set up their camps and reported back with intelligence that any military commander would envy. The first trap was simple: a deadfall positioned on the most obvious approach route. 3 mercenaries walked under it before Hanul cut the trigger line. Logs and rocks fell like judgment. 2 aliens were crushed instantly. The third was pinned, screaming for help that would come too late. The second group heard the screams and rushed to investigate. They found their dying companion and immediately formed a defensive circle, weapons raised. They were professional enough not to panic. That discipline saved their lives for approximately 30 more seconds. Bomb hit them like a freight train from the left flank. The Vrax's charge scattered the formation. 1 mercenary got off a shot that scored along Bomb's scaled hide, doing no real damage. Then Day arrived from the right side, jaws closing around an alien's torso with a sound like a car being crushed. The remaining mercenaries from that group fled. They didn't get far. Hanul had circled around behind them. When they ran past her hiding spot, she struck with precision, her venomous quills finding gaps in their armor. The third group, including Kral, heard everything over their communication network. They heard the screams, the roars, the sounds of death. Kral felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. "Fall back to the landing site," he ordered. "We need to regroup and reassess." But Taemin had already anticipated that. While his companions dealt with the mercenaries, he had circled wide and reached the landing site first. The shuttle was locked, but the external fuel lines weren't. A few cuts with his knife and some creative use of their own explosives, and the shuttle became useless. Kral and his remaining 3 mercenaries arrived to find their escape route destroyed, and a human sitting calmly on a rock nearby. Bomhanul and Day emerged from the tree line behind them, cutting off retreat. "You boys look lost," Taman said. "This is what happens when you hunt people on their home ground." Kral raised his weapon, but Taman was faster. He had taken a plasma rifle from one of the dead mercenaries. The shot took Kral in the shoulder, spinning him around. The other mercenaries dropped their weapons immediately, hands raised in surrender. "Smart," Taman said. He gestured for them to sit. "Your bosses sent you to clean up their mess. They told you this would be easy. They lied to you." He stripped them of their equipment, including their communicators. One of them, a younger alien who looked barely old enough to be a soldier, stared at Bomb with wide eyes. "How did you do it?" the young mercenary asked. "They are apex predators. They should have killed you." Taman looked at Bomb, who was methodically licking a minor wound on his foreleg. "I treated them with respect. I helped them when they were hurt. I never tried to dominate them. We're partners, not master and pets." He activated one of the communicators and broadcast on an open channel that he knew would be intercepted. "This is Sergeant Taman Park. You sent 12 mercenaries to kill me. 4 are dead. The rest are my prisoners. Send better hunters or leave me alone. Your choice." The transmission went viral within hours. Independent journalists who had been following the story broadcast it across the galactic network. Images of a lone human defending himself against a dozen armed mercenaries with nothing but tactical thinking, and 3 predators who fought by his side. The Galactic Council chambers descended into complete chaos. Some species demanded immediate nuclear strikes on Kier 9. Others argued for negotiations. The xenophobic faction lost significant political support as evidence of their illegal activities spread through every news network. Humanity's ambassador, a shrewd diplomat named Ji Woo, seized the opportunity. She called for emergency hearings, demanding accountability for the illegal execution arena and the assassination attempt on a human citizen. On Kier 9, Taman released the surviving mercenaries with a message for their employers. "Tell them I'm not leaving. Tell them this planet is under my protection now. And tell them if they send anyone else, I won't be as merciful." The mercenaries left on emergency beacons, too terrified to argue. When they were gone, Taman sat with his pack and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had survived another round, but he knew this wasn't over. Bomb pressed his massive head against Taman's shoulder, a gesture of affection the Vraks had learned over their time together. Hanuel chittered softly from her perch, her way of expressing contentment. Day rumbled deep in his chest, a sound that meant safety and home. They were more than a pack now. They were a statement, proof that humans could adapt to anything, survive anything, and turn enemies into family. The Council would have to deal with that truth, whether they liked it or not. The courtroom was silent when they read the sentence. Sergeant Taman Park stood at attention, his face showing nothing while his mind raced. 300 people alive because of him, and this was his reward. The judge, a tall alien with too many eyes, clicked his mandibles in what might have been satisfaction. "You will be transported to Kier 9, the judge said. "May your gods show you mercy, because we will not." Taman knew what Kier 9 meant. Everyone in the military knew. It was the place where the Galactic Council sent people to die, not quickly but slowly, torn apart by creatures that evolution had turned into perfect killers. The average survival time was 4 hours. The record was 11 hours, set by some alien warrior whose species prided itself on combat prowess. They gave him 3 days to prepare, 3 days to accept that he was going to die on a world designed to kill him. His commanding officer visited once, looking uncomfortable. The man who had filed the charges against him could barely meet his eyes. "You embarrassed important people," the officer said quietly. "That's the real crime." Taman had saved those colonists by stealing a cargo shuttle and ramming it into a pirate vessel. He had used mining explosives to blow open their ship and boarded it alone with nothing but a rifle and pure determination. He had won. But he had also ignored direct orders to wait for proper military response, orders that would have arrived 3 hours too late. The transport to Kier 9 took 2 weeks. Taman spent the time exercising in his cell and reviewing everything he knew about survival. The guards were professional but distant. They had seen others make this journey. None of those others had come back. On the final day, they gave him his equipment. 1 combat knife, standard issue. 5 days of rations in compact form. A canteen that could filter water. and a distress beacon that looked like it had been broken deliberately. When Timon pointed this out, the guard just shrugged. Regulations say you get a beacon, the alien said. Nobody said it had to work. The drop pod was cramped and smelled like fear. How many others had ridden in this same seat, knowing what waited below? The pod's AI spoke in a cheerful voice that made Timon want to punch something. Preparing for atmospheric entry. Please remain calm. Your destination is beautiful this time of year. Through the small window, Timon watched as Kier 9 grew larger. The planet was mostly red and purple, with massive forests that looked like they were bleeding. 3 moons hung in the sky above. It would have been pretty if it wasn't a death sentence. The entry was rough. The pod shook and screamed as it hit the atmosphere. Timon's teeth rattled in his skull. Then came the impact, a bone-jarring crash that threw him against the harness hard enough to bruise. The pod had landed at an angle, half buried in soft earth. Timon popped the hatch and rolled out, knife already in his hand. His marine training kicked in automatically. Assess the situation. Check for immediate threats. Find cover. He was in a clearing surrounded by massive trees with bark that looked like dried blood. The air was thick and hot and everything smelled like copper and vegetation. Something roared in the distance. It was a sound designed by evolution to trigger fear in anything that heard it. Timon felt his heart rate spike but forced himself to breathe slowly. Fear was natural. Panic would kill him. He spent the first hour securing the crash site. The pod was useless except for scrap metal. He salvaged what he could and found a cave system nearby that would serve as shelter. The rations went into his pack. The knife went onto his belt. The broken beacon went into a pocket, because maybe he could fix it if he survived long enough to try. By the time the sun started to set, Timon had a fire going and a rough perimeter marked. He had no illusions about the perimeter stopping anything, but it made him feel better. He ate a quarter ration and allowed himself to think about home. His sister would be furious when she found out what happened. She had always said his stubbornness would get him killed. Looks like you were right, he muttered to the fire. The attack came on the second day. Timon was checking his traps when he felt eyes on him. He had learned to trust that feeling in combat zones. He froze, hand moving slowly toward his knife. The creature stepped out of the shadows like something from a nightmare. It was huge, easily the size of a small truck with 6 legs that ended in claws designed for ripping. Its body was covered in scales that looked like black glass and its eyes glowed with an inner fire. A Vrax, according to the database he had studied. An apex predator that could run down prey for hours without tiring. Timon should have been dead. The Vrax should have closed the distance and torn him apart before he could react. But something was wrong. The creature moved with a limp favoring its right side. And it was thin. Too thin for something its size. When it opened its mouth to roar, Timon saw the problem. The inside of its mouth was infected, and one of its fangs was broken and rotting. The Vrax charged, but it was slow. Timon dodged to the side and rolled behind a tree. His mind raced through options. He could run, but it would catch him eventually. He could fight, but his knife would barely scratch those scales. Or he could try something incredibly stupid. The Vrax circled the tree, growling. Timon took a deep breath and stepped into view, holding his hands up and out, the universal gesture of non-aggression. The creature stopped, confused. This was wrong. Prey ran or fought. It didn't stand still and make calming noises. Easy there, Timon said softly. You're hurt, aren't you? Let me help. He moved slowly, keeping his voice steady. He had done this before with scared dogs in war zones. Maybe the principle was the same. Maybe he was insane. The Vrax watched him with those glowing eyes, its body tense but not attacking. Timon opened his pack and pulled out his medical kit. He had antibiotics meant for humans, but chemistry was chemistry. If the infection was bacterial, this might work. He showed the Vrax the supplies, talking the whole time. I'm going to call you Bomb, he said. You look like a bomb. Big guy like you needs a good name. The Vrax lowered its head and Timon took the biggest risk of his life. He approached the creature and began treating its infected mouth. Later, sitting by his fire with a massive predator sleeping peacefully 20 feet away, Timon laughed at the absurdity of it all. They had sent him to a death world to be killed by monsters. He had made a friend instead. The alien overseers stared at their monitors in confusion. The human had been on Kier 9 for 7 days. The Vrax they had sent to kill him was now following him around like a trained animal. This was not supposed to happen. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Run diagnostics on the Vrax, the lead overseer commanded. There must be a malfunction in its enhancement programming. But there was no malfunction. The Vrax was healthy, well-fed, and completely loyal to the human who had saved its life. The creature's infected mouth had healed. Its energy levels were higher than they had been in months. And every time Taemin moved to a new location, Bomb followed. Taemin was getting used to having a giant predator as a companion. Bomb was smart, much smarter than he had expected. The creature understood gestures and seemed to recognize certain words. When Taemin said stay, Bomb stayed. When he said come, Bomb came. It was like training a dog if that dog weighed 2 tons and could bite through steel. The real surprise came when Bomb started hunting. The Vrax would disappear for hours and return with fresh kills, large kills, animals that Taemin would have struggled to take down alone. Bomb would drop the carcasses at Taemin's feet and then sit back, waiting for approval. Good boy, Taemin would say, and he swore the creature looked pleased. The second predator arrived during a storm. Taemin was in his cave shelter, reinforcing the walls with salvaged materials when he heard the rock slide. The sound was tremendous, like thunder but sharper. He grabbed his knife and ran toward the noise with Bomb at his side. Part of the cliff face had collapsed. Rain hammered down, making visibility poor. Taemin scanned the area and saw movement in the rubble. Something was trapped under the rocks, struggling to get free. Bomb growled low in his throat, a warning sound. Hold, Taemin said, approaching carefully. The creature under the rocks was different from Bomb. It was smaller, sleeker, built for speed and ambush rather than endurance hunting. Its body could shift colors, blending with the surroundings. A score, another apex predator. This one was female, judging by the crest along her spine. She thrashed when she saw Taemin, trying to lunge at him despite being pinned. Her eyes were wild with pain and rage. Blood seeped from where a boulder pressed against her side. She would die here if he left her. She would probably try to kill him if he freed her. Taemin looked at Bomb. What do you think, buddy? Should we help her? Bomb tilted his massive head, studying the trapped score. Then, to Taemin's surprise, the Vrax moved forward and began pushing rocks away with his powerful legs. He was helping. It took 2 days to dig the score out completely. Taemin worked in shifts, moving rocks when he had the strength, resting when he didn't. He talked to the trapped predator the whole time, keeping his voice calm and steady. He shared his food with her, tossing pieces of meat close enough that she could reach them. I'm going to call you Hanul, he said. Because you fell from the sky, didn't you? Just like me. When the last rock was moved and Hanul could finally stand, Taemin expected her to attack. Instead, she limped away and collapsed in the shade. She was exhausted and injured. Taemin treated her wounds the same way he had treated Bomb's, working slowly and carefully while she watched him with suspicious eyes. Hanul was more difficult than Bomb. She was aggressive and independent, snapping at Taemin when he got too close. But he was patient. He had been a sergeant in the Marines. He knew how to handle difficult soldiers. You gave them space when they needed it. You set clear boundaries, and most importantly, you earned their respect through consistency. After a week, Hanul stopped trying to bite him. After 2 weeks, she started following him and Bomb on their daily patrols. After 3 weeks, she brought her first kill to the camp and dropped it at Taemin's feet, just like Bomb did. The alien overseers were no longer confused. They were terrified. 2 apex predators now defended the human. The council chambers erupted in arguments. Some wanted to end the experiment immediately. Others wanted to see how far it could go. A xenophobic faction made the decision to escalate. Send the Droll beast, their leader commanded. If it cannot kill the human, nothing can. The third predator was dropped during the night. Taemin heard it before he saw it. The sound of massive footsteps, trees being knocked aside like grass. Something big was coming and it was angry. The Droll beast crashed into the clearing like a living tank. It was bigger than Bomb, broader and more heavily armored. Its body was a nightmare combination of reptilian scales and mammalian fur. Its jaws could crush boulders, and it had been starved for 3 days before being released. Bomb and Hanul moved to flank Taemin, growling at the newcomer. The Droll beast roared back, a sound that shook the ground. This was it. This was the fight that would probably kill them all. But Taemin didn't draw his knife. Instead, he stepped forward, placing himself between his companions and the Droll beast. He held up one hand in a stopping gesture. The beast hesitated, confused by this tiny creature's audacity. You're hungry, Taemin said. I get it. But if you attack us, you'll have to go through all 3 of us. And you're already weak from starvation. He reached into his pack and pulled out a massive fish he had caught that morning. It was meant to feed him for 2 days. Instead, he threw it at the droll beast's feet. Eat first. Fight later if you still want to. The standoff lasted for several long seconds. Then the droll beast lowered its head and began eating. It devoured the fish in seconds, bones and all. When it finished, it looked at Timon again. The rage in its eyes had dimmed. Now there was only calculation. Over the next several days, Timon worked to integrate the droll beast into his growing pack. He used Bomb and Hanul as intermediaries, letting them establish social hierarchy through non-lethal displays. He provided food without demanding submission, and he gave the creature a name, Day, he said, short and strong just like you. The alien journalists who had intercepted Timon's earlier transmissions were now broadcasting footage to the entire galaxy. Images of a lone human living peacefully among 3 of the deadliest predators known to science. The Galactic Council's illegal execution arena was exposed for all to see. Public opinion began to shift. Humans were no longer just seen as violent primitives. They were adaptable. They could form bonds across species barriers. They could turn enemies into allies. In his cave on Kier 9, surrounded by creatures that should have killed him, Timon maintained his equipment and planned for whatever came next. Because he knew the Council wouldn't let this stand. They would send something worse. He just had to be ready when they did. Bomb slept near the fire, his massive bulk rising and falling with each breath. Hanul perched on a rocky outcrop, her eyes scanning the darkness for threats. Day lay near the cave entrance, blocking it with his armored body. They were a pack now, a family, and Timon would protect them the same way they protected him.